Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Holes from 2003. And this was a winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge to my Patreon, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. And this winner was chosen by Jordan Bouchard. Most of the reviews I found of this were of kids who grew up with this movie, and they have fond memories of it. And they also think it's like the kind of cliche everyone says, it's like, man, things are weird when I grew up. What was with this weird movie? I did actually see this opening weekend. I was a freshman in college, but it was because my family was visiting, and my brother really wanted to see it, and I was like, well, I'll take you to see this movie. He's not a big movie person, so I was like, well, I'll take advantage of this, taking my little brother to the movies thing, and he really liked the book, and I remember us liking it a lot. I remember he thought it was different from the book, but still liked it. And we saw it at Regal Union Square, which when I shoot and release this may still be there or is going to close soon. I'm not sure. Right around when this video comes, which is sad. But we had a great time. It was a wonderful experience. I got to see a cool movie with my brother. I remember thinking it was an interesting and good movie. And I only saw, like, if I'd see it was playing on TV, I'd watch a bit of it. And I was like, yeah, that was good. And I'd move on. But I wouldn't say I grew up with it, or this is a movie I had on all the time, or was always on the Disney Channel for me, or something like that. It was a thing I saw once. My brother really liked it. I think maybe he saw it again. I don't know. But I think a lot of you who saw this and was like, this is kind of a different kind of movie. And when I was watching it, I was like, there's a lot of cutting, especially for a kid's film, which in this era did not have a lot of as many cuts, as many edits as this does. And at first I was like, because I didn't actually look up the director while I was watching it, and I was like, it's probably like a new director who's trying to do something different, and it didn't feel like a usual kind of kids film. It's not directed that way. And then I looked up who the director was, which is Andrew Davis. Now, Andrew Davis directed The Fugitive with Harrison Ford, as well as Under Siege and Perfect Murder, which was a Dial M for Murder remake. He directed Collateral Damage, which was a Arnold Schwarzenegger movie that got delayed because of 9/11. That's the only, I've never seen it actually. That's the only way I remember that movie. But he was not like a kid's movie director. In fact, I think he developed it because his kids liked the book, which is also why Sigourney Weaver's in this. And you can tell this is not done by a normal kid director. And it actually reminds me of a director I really like, William Wellman from Classic Hollywood, did like one kids film, Goodbye My Lady. And that doesn't play like a regular kids film. You can tell the sensibility is different. I'm not going to say off, but I think he gave it, first, certainly the cast and the way he put it together is because you had a really experienced, known director. You did The Fugitive. The Fugitive was a huge hit, was nominated for Best Picture. He was not nominated for Best Director, but a lot of other places he was. He made some pretty major, big movies. It seemed like it was a property he developed himself, not one that Disney went out and bought, to my understanding. And it felt like it sort of feels like someone's passion project. And when you think of like everything he sort of accomplishes through his direction, and also that this has a screenplay written by the author of the book, which is unusual. They actually had Richard Kelly write a script, who famously made Donnie Darko and more famously Southland Tales. And he wrote a post-apocalyptic version of the script that was really violent, and they felt that was not the right tone and, maybe not the book Holes. And so they went actually with the author's script instead, which I think is a solid script. This is, if you didn't know, about a kid named Stanley Yelnats, who is sent after he steals shoes, but shoes are thrown over a bridge, and he grabs them, and the cops arrest him for these shoes, which were going to be used. They were like a famous sports person shoes, and he was going to use them to raise money for an orphanage. And so he goes to this kind of child behavior camp for 18 months, which seems extreme, but I don't know. But whatever, we're not going to question that, I guess. But he goes to this camp. They have to dig holes all day because it builds character. He meets his friend Zero, and they kind of dig holes, and he finds about the history of his family, the history of this, what was a former town, and now the reason they're really digging the holes is so they can find this old female kind of bank robber and her treasure that's somewhere in where they're digging holes, which used to be a lake. And it gets... There's a lot to it, but it's basically about kids who dig holes and the treasure that they're really digging for, I guess. There is a lot going on, and I think that is why there's all this cutting in this movie. And in a sense, it's like you see a lot of cutting in, like, you know, the Bourne movies, most certainly, and other kind of films like that in the 2000s, and it's more of a style reason. Oftentimes when I'm watching this, I was like, I think you did this just to like get everything in here. I think it was an actual storytelling reason. Also, like, this cast, other than, like, this is Shia LaBeouf's first movie, I'd say his first big movie, but you have Sigourney Weaver, Jon Voight being completely over the top doing a kids movie thing. I don't like Jon Voight as a person, but I was like kind of surprised by his performance because he really like goes for it. He's really like kind of being very camp and stuff. He's kind of good at it. Tim Blake Nelson, Patricia Arquette. I mean, like, just before even at the end credits, they start listing people off. I think of the 4 people I mentioned, 3 of which are Oscar winners, and then you get to Shia LaBeouf. It's like kind of crazy, the cast he assembled, but also it's like they all seem to be really into their roles. The cast is really great, as well as like he's explaining like the history of the families. He's explaining the history of this town, and it never gets too much. Like, this film could have collapsed in on itself because there's so many plot lines, and I can understand if a producer is like, well, you have to get rid of like the family thing and this and that, but it's like it all feels connected and honestly works. And I think that's because you have a steady director in it, because this is a very experienced director at this point. And one of the reasons I mentioned Goodbye My Lady, the William Wellman film, is like that was like the end of his filmography. This is towards this director's end of his filmography, and it does feel like when you have a really steady hand doing a kid's film, rather than, you know, a workman for hire director or Kenny Ortega or something. It doesn't have the same vibe to it. Like, when you have someone outside of that world come in, it seems to work better for kids films than like horror or other things that sometimes can be a disaster. I actually liked the immediacy he brought to it, like how he understands like each of these characters, even though they're wearing like the same clothes and stuff, feel like different people. Each of the boys are played with distinct accents, distinct different kinds of voices. There's certain distinct things about them that he really highlights in it. All the names and stuff, but and just like all the lore within it. Like, you know, I hadn't seen this in forever, so most of it felt new to me. While I was watching, it was like, oh, and that connects to that, and like, oh, it also Eartha Kitt's in that. Like I remember the time that was the one thing that really stuck out. I always remembered Eartha Kitt's in this because Eartha Kitt is awesome. Anything Eartha Kitt's in, I'm going to remember that she's in it. The rest, I don't know. But Eartha Kitt, it's an effective kids film because it's, you know, a lot about hard work, about adults being unfair, but it also, you know, this was 2003. We hadn't gotten into like, let's buy every hot kids book in the world from movie studios and make it into a big franchise sort of thing. I guess Holes isn't a franchise anyway, but I do think this falls into the line of like what Harry Potter would represent at the same time, where it's like looking at the failures of, maybe more so now even, looking at the failures of a previous generation and trying to correct those wrongs for the future. And I do think there's a lot of, you know, the whole idea of like children are our future, or the world is yours, and all that stuff that is told to kids. I mean, because obviously that's sort of how it works. Like, naturally, I'm like, well, they are like literally our future. There's not much we can do, you know, that just happens. But I do think there's a sense of responsibility that's sort of natural, but like kind of a hopeful one, that like you will do better. Like the whole idea of the curse on his family, the whole idea of like that these people have done wrong. They like the Sigourney Weaver's family has done all these wrong things, that all these people have been led astray. But these kids, the one who can't read, Zero, which I had a friend who made Cleese with me also called Zero, so that was funny at the time as well. But very much side note. But it's very much about like correcting what had happened and what the situation you were forced into, and making a better world for tomorrow. And that might, I think there's all these things of like Pixar is all about believe in yourself and blah blah, but I do think it's a kind of more powerful message to show kids that like you can become and be part of a change that can like make the world better. And maybe, you know, to be give a level of importance to this movie that's like way too far. Maybe that's why we're seeing more protests now. Maybe that's why we're seeing more people feeling like they can do that. Maybe or maybe not. I don't know. But the idea that that is a healthy thing in a kid's film, as I show films to my kids, I often think of the moral messages that they sell to you, and if it's evil or insidious or something. And I actually think this is a really great kids film because it sells you like a very healthy, wonderful message about kids working together. And I was a kid who was in like programs where it was like, the sort of rejects kind of thing, and you would see a really colorful group of kids. Like that was always kind of something I actually liked about that when I was a kid, in being in those groups. And you would remember almost everyone's personality. It did feel like everyone was very distinct, and I don't know, that held true to me. I think this is very well directed and interestingly directed. It is crazy, and it did well at the time. A.O. Scott gave it a crazy good review, like the best American film he had seen that year, which was like, whoa. Roger Ebert gave it 3.5 stars. I think as a kid's film, it's very interesting and it's very good and it's very solid for everything it's covering. I don't know about all that, but like I remember the beginning of 2003 being sort of rough, so maybe, competition-wise, I do think it's a very solid film. I think it's because people in it sort of believed in it and believed that it was important to kids and held an importance to them. It wasn't like it was a signed thing. It seemed like he got a lot of people involved and developed it. Maybe there's more to this developing and I'm misunderstanding things. And I actually thought I had read the director had done this because it was his kid's favorite book. I couldn't find that for some reason right before reviewing it, so maybe I'm a little off on that. But it didn't feel that way, at least in the direction. There feels like a real heart to this, and sort of like, in a sense, something even like about Cartoon Saloon, where they're like telling these kind of stories to pass on kind of knowledge and folklore. And I think this is passing on, obviously, things about the Old West and our past as America in certain regards, because there is certain stories in this film that, in some ways, I think this film's, other than, how you feel about Shia LaBeouf right now, that ages probably better than you'd think it would. I do think it's someone like hopeful in the moral message of this is presenting it kind of like, I would say, a way to kind of show kids the importance and the role they can have in shaping the future, and for the better, which I think is a wonderful thing. So I quite liked rewatching this film. I thought it was really good. I think it's a really solid film. I don't know when I'll show it to my kids, as my daughter doesn't particularly like that have all boys in them, so it might be a little bit till I show my son. I don't think this film would pass the Bechdel test, but I don't think it was designed to whatsoever either. And not that every film should. I was just being. It's a very solid kids film. If you have I've always wanted to rewatch it, absolutely do it, because it very much holds up. It's a very solid movie, and it is a different vibe. You are totally right. Everyone is like, this weird kind of thing. It is definitely a weird thing. It is not an example of the time period whatsoever. It's just kind of like all these people came together and make this like almost over talented kind of kids film, and I kind of appreciate it. I kind of like it. I think it's a very solid film. It probably should be more on lists of like kids films families should watch, because I think this is a very solid family film. I mean, also you have Henry Winkler. So if you've seen Holes and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And this was a winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month.